Luckily, no one on the internet has any opinion on this whatsoever. I've been thinking about switching from 10s back to 9s for a while now, and I finally decided to pull the trigger and do it. Now, today we're going to hear two guitars strung with 10s and then strung with 9s to see if you can hear any sort of difference in tone, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on here, why I decided to switch, some of the contributing factors, what I think now, and why I think I am, at least for the time being, going to stick with 9s. So let's dive right in here with the Gibson SG. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, so I've been playing 10s for a very, very long time, and it's been at least a decade. And I switched from 11s. I used 11s probably from like 2006 to 2011 ish, 2011, 2012, before switching to 10s, and I've used 10s ever since. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I have not used 9s since I started playing guitar, but there are a couple of things that led me to want to try out 9s. It actually came from YouTube videos. Now, Rick Beato came out with a pretty high profile video about using the right strings maybe a year or so ago, where they compared a number of sets of strings. And then I saw some other videos where they compared 9s and 10s. And what really struck me was that I liked the tone of the nines better. It really, really surprised me. And that was what first kind of planted the seed. Now, last year I used a Music Man guitar on loan, and that was definitely strung with nines. When I used it, I thought, wow, this is really comfortable. I'm really enjoying playing this a little bit more. Which brings me to one of my first points. One of the reasons I didn't switch to nines earlier on was because I was afraid of slightly overpowering them. I'm so used to playing tens that I thought, if I switch to nines, will I be overbending all the time? Will I even, like, when I hold down a chord, will I hold the chord will my vibrato and just kind of holding down the chord, hold it tightly to the point where it's going to be a little bit out of tune. So far, luckily, I have not found that. I thought that I would be more reliant on the tension of the tens to sort of tell me when to stop my bends. You get used to the feeling of the strings give and whatnot. And I just found that it wasn't doing that when I had the Music Man guitar. Now, the other thing that I've started doing over the past year or two is playing in more detuned sort of settings. So I've been tuning down a half step quite a bit, and even on some acoustic guitars, I've tuned down a whole step. When it comes to guitar string gauge, the classic that people talk about as far as using light gauge strings is Billy Gibbons, who I believe uses sevens. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the ones who are in favor of heavier gauge strings will talk about Stevie Ray Vaughan. Well, it's important to note that Stevie Ray Vaughan tuned down a half step. Also, according to the Rick Beato video, that later on in his career, he was using 11s. Well, 11s tuned down a half step are going to feel like 10s, which is what I was using. But when I heard those videos and I heard how much I liked the tone of 9s better, I still didn't switch. And I got to thinking after a while, why am I not switching? I like the sound of 9s better. What is holding me back? And you know what it was? And it's silly, but it was all those voices I kept remembering from when I started playing guitar, when it was all the kind of macho guitar players going on and on about how real guitar players use heavy strings. You gotta be a man and use heavy strings. And I started to think, how stupid is that? Why do I care what someone else thinks is manlier than something else? I think the tone of the 9s sounds better, and I find them more comfortable to play. Now, I've played on things as heavy as 12s and then up to 13s on acoustic guitars, and I have played 12s on electric before. And I can do it, but I find it unpleasant, and I don't like the tone. And it's not even one of those things where it's like, oh, well, you just got to duke it out for better tone. No, I like the tone less. I think the 9s sound better. They have a little bit more twang and pluck to them. But what's really noticeable to me is that there's this slight dip in the lower mids, which is something that I always want to pull in guitar recordings anyway. That sort of slightly flubby, percussive bottom end that you sometimes get, that I've always found just a little too much, and I had no idea that strings would make this kind of a difference with it. On the 9s, the bottom end seems, there's certainly a little tiny bit less, but it seems a little tighter, and particularly those lower mids just seem a little tighter and more focused, and they're not that kind of flubby percussive feeling. Now, it's subtle, but it's noticeable. And then when you add in the fact that, yeah, they are more comfortable, and I did not find that I was overpowering them, I'm really going to commit, at least for the summer. I've got a bunch of gigs coming up over the summer, and I think at least for the summer, I'm going to try my guitars with 9s, and for starters, I'm very pleased. I like the tone and I like the feel better. Now I just want to see how they hold up live over the next few months. So, before I explain what's going on at the end, I want you to leave in the comments, what string gauge do you use? Now, again, according to the video where they compared many string sets, I thought the 9s sounded best. I thought they sounded better than 8s. I thought the 9s just sat right exactly where I like to hear them. Now, 9s and 10s are probably going to be one of the most common, and that's what I'm focusing on in this video. So the reason that I would suggest switching to 9s like I have is for nothing else other than the tone. The tone, to my ear, sounds better. It sits better in a mix. It gives me more of the guitar's character that I want to hear. Now, obviously, and this should go without saying, but I know that it won't, it's obviously a personal preference sort of thing. If you prefer the tone of 10s or 11s or 8s or whatever it is, use what you prefer. I would suggest 9s if you haven't tried them. this is the sound that I think works really, really well, which is why I titled the video this way. I think a lot of people who use slightly heavier gauge strings try out nines, because I think tonally they just are giving me what I want to get from the guitar. Obviously everybody has a difference of opinion, everybody has a different rig, everybody has different sounds that they go for, so it might not suit everyone. At least I would say think about string gauge. We all tend to get kind of locked into what string gauge that we like. Think about your string gauge and maybe think about switching it up a little bit if you want to. So we'll talk about the SG a little bit. On the SG, you are hearing the 10s and then the 9s back to back. Now, I primarily use Elixir strings, which is what I have right here. I like Elixir Nano Web strings, which is what you're going to hear next. The SG happens to be strung up with Ernie balls. I just had some sets lying around and happen to have the extra sets of 9s there, which I came across and involved in a trade, and that kind of gave me the opportunity to like, all right, let's do this, let's jump in and try it. I've got these 9s, let's give it a shot. I primarily use Elixirs, but every so often when other strings come around, I'll certainly give them a shot. So the SG is strung up with Ernie balls, and now the Stratocaster is strung up with Elixirs. The interesting thing is I actually still detuned the Stratocaster half step. This was the other thing. Now I thought, okay, well, are the 9s going to feel and sound just super flubbly wubbly? Are they going to do the flub bubble thing? Are the 9s going to feel super wubbly flubbly shubbly if I detune it? It was right on the edge. So it could just use a little bit more of a setup. I did have to do a tiny bit of setup to account for the difference in string gauge on the Stratocaster. But in general, it was right on the edge. So as far as playing, particularly live, 9s detuned to half step, I don't know that I would do that live, but tonally I still like them better, even detuned to half step. That one's more about feeling, not necessarily one way or another on that. I just need to give that one a little bit more time. For the overdriven tones, I'm using a Schnobel tone Daily Driver. You will notice some clips, at least I noticed, sounded more different than others. I'm going to do the clean and the overdriven, and there were some where I really noticed the difference, and then others where I almost didn't notice the difference, because there are a lot of things that come into play. I actually am fairly light on the guitar. I don't pick hard. I almost never break strings, almost never. I don't have a very heavy hand when I play. And so that comes into it. So if you're not really digging in, you might notice less of a difference, less of a drastic difference. So you notice, like with the SG, I at least thought when I was playing a little bit harder for the distorted rhythm, the difference was a bit more pronounced. So there's certainly factors that come into play beyond just the string gauge. What kind of touch you have on the guitar makes a difference. Your dynamics makes a difference. Now I am going to put links in the description to where you can buy the sets of strings that I'm using in this video. If you buy through those links, those are affiliate links that I get a little bit of a kickback from that helps support the channel, so please think about that if you're looking at buying strings. We're going to try it out with the Stratocaster that you can hear what you think between the 10s and the 9s, and again, these are strung up with Elixirs as opposed to the Ernie balls. So check this out with the Stratocaster. Please let us know in the comments, what string gauges do you use? How extensively have you experimented to find the string gauge that you like? Have you been stuck with one for a while and been thinking about a change? Please let us know what your story is. If you get a chance, I would highly suggest trying out 9s, if again for nothing else other than I think that's the best guitar tone for string gauge. I'm Jack Fossett. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.